Matt Latimer, the author of Speechless, it's hyphenated there, Speechless, Tales of a White House Survivor. This endlessly repeated healthcare speech that Obama keeps giving over and over and over. Do you think on that subject, that issue particularly, he has reached the point of diminishing returns?
I do. In fact, if anybody had asked me, not that they did, I would have advised him not to have given that speech that last week at all. And the reason is, you'll get a short-term gain because he's the president and he's speaking to a joint session of Congress, but you still have the same problem. He hasn't changed everything. I mean, he got a couple of blips of a few points in the polls, but in the end, you still have the same issue. You have members of your own party who have trouble with the plan you're enacting, and it's more than just going out and speaking constantly about it. It's, a speech, as I say, is not a substitute for a strategy or a policy, and we presidents are now relying so much on speeches as media events as a way of convincing people when, if you hear the same thing over and over again, you're not convincing anyone.
Let's talk about the second part of the title of your book. The title is Speechless. The subtitle is Tales of a White House Survivor. That word survivor suggests you were surrounded by sharks in the White House. Am I reading the right implication into that?
Well, my book isn't quite out yet, so I have to leave it to your imagination to what that really refers to. But basically, the point of it is, it's very hard to come to Washington with principles and values and hold on to them and come out intact from the political system. As I'm sure all of your listeners know, we send people to Washington constantly who say they're conservatives and then they don't act that way when they're there. Or even people who say they're liberals, and then once they come to Washington, they don't act the way that liberals hope they would act. And it's very hard in Washington and to get involved in politics and still come out of it knowing who you are and, knowing what you believe in. And I truly believe that I did that, but it was not easy.
There are undoubtedly plenty of young political junkies who think that it'd be a fascinating career going into the speechwriting field. What's the path upward before you get to write for the big guy? What was your path upward as a speechwriter? I mean, you don't go to the major leagues immediately if you're a ball player. Most of them don't anyway. And I would suspect that most speechwriters don't start off with a job in the White House. What was your path through the jungle on the way to the top?
Well, actually, I had actually gone to law school at the University of Michigan, and I had planned to be a lawyer. And my parents, who were both liberal Democrats, were very, shall we say, ill at ease about my decision to go and give that all up to become a writer for a conservative president, which was my goal. But I packed up my old Dodge Dynasty and went to Washington, D.C., and got any Capitol Hill job I could find. Started writing for members of Congress and senators, and went to the Pentagon and worked for Secretary Rumsfeld until he resigned, and then went from there to the White House.
How did you like Rummy? My wife was his translator when he was at what was the big drug company, the pharmaceutical?
Oh, Cyril.
G.D. Cyril. She did the translation because she speaks like a half dozen languages, and she did the foreign translations for Rummy, and she really liked the guy. What was your experience?
Well, I talk a lot about in my book about my experiences with Rumsfeld, and I encourage people to buy it when it comes out because I think they'd be surprised about some of the things that you find about Rumsfeld, along with many other people who I worked with or saw in the White House. He was as you would imagine, he's a complicated person, but he could be tough. He was tough on himself, but I found him very funny, and I respected him and liked him.
She said he was a very straight shooter. He wasn't necessarily always a pussycat, but if he said, this is the way things are going to be, that's the way things were going to be. You could count on his word meaning something. Yeah. Did working for members of Congress raise or lower your opinion of our elected leaders?
Well, It really depends on the member you're talking about, but first of all, I want to thank everybody in San Francisco for sending Nancy Pelosi to Congress. She has been an endless source of entertainment. You can have her back anytime you want. But, I saw a lot of people in Washington who have forgotten why they got elected. I saw wonderful people who do remember why they were elected, I should also add, and it was an honor and privilege to have worked for some of the people that I worked for. But, and the Senate especially is sort of the last vestiges of 17th century French aristocracy. They're chauffeured around. They have more than one, two, three offices in one Capitol complex. Heaven forbid they walk from the Capitol to vote to their offices. They have trains that drive them, or they have taxpayer-funded staffers who chauffeur them around everywhere. And it's really hard in that kind of environment, that bubble, to remember who you are and why you came to Washington.
That's why the Capitol ought to be moved to some remote place in some North Dakota and see how they like it. Your book does make mention of people like Sarah Palin and Hillary Clinton. Is that in the context of what was being said about them in the Bush White House?
It is, and I think you'll find some surprise. I think readers will find some surprising things that were said about them and others in the White House. And I'd love to come back and talk to you about the book in detail when it comes out. It comes out a week from today.
All right, let's do it. I want to hear what the Bushies were saying about Sarah Palin.
Well, I'll tell you what. If I come back on, any question you want to have answered, I will answer it.
All right.
Very cool.
Excellent. It's Matt Latimer. The book coming out shortly is called Speechless Tales of a White House Survivor. It's Hot Talk 560 KSFO.